Throughout the years, I've had the privilege of sharing the following short story on numerous occasions, and I'm always amazed at how the Lord uses this story to impact the lives of those who hear it. The allegory is titled The Man and the Birds, and it was originally scripted and narrated by none other than the infamous Paul Harvey. Though it's been adapted many times, its message remains the same. Job 12:7 says, "Ask the birds of the sky, and they will tell you." So let's pull up a chair, have ears to hear what the birds are saying. Now, the man to whom I'm going to introduce you to was not a Scrooge, but he was a kind and decent man. Most would consider him a good man, and he was generous to his family. He was upright in his dealings with his fellow man. He was a practical man, though, so when his wife asked him to join her for Christmas service, he realized he just couldn't go. He told her he didn't believe all the incarnation stuff that churches proclaimed at this time of year, and it just did not make sense to him, and he was too honest to pretend otherwise. His practical mind just could not swallow the Jesus story about how God came to earth as a man. "I'm truly sorry to upset you," he told his wife, "but I'm not going to go with you this Christmas Eve to church." He told her he'd feel like a hypocrite and that he'd much rather stay at home. He did promise, though, that he'd wait up for him, and as they drove off in the snow, he waved goodbye. As they drove off, the snow began to thicken, and so he hurried back to his home where he knew a warm, hearty fire greeted him. He went over to the window, began to watch the flurries getting heavier and heavier, and decided to go back to his fireside chair and began to read his newspaper. Minutes later, he was startled by a thudding sound, then another, and then another, sort of a thump or a thud. At first he thought someone must be throwing snowballs against his living room window, but when he went outside to investigate, he found a flock of birds huddled miserably in the snow. They'd been caught in the storm and in a desperate search for shelter tried to fly through his large landscape window. Well, he couldn't let the poor creatures lie there and freeze, and he remembered the barn where his children stabled their pony. Now that will provide a warm shelter. If only he could just direct the birds to it. Quickly he put on his coat and galoshes and trampled through the deepening snow to the barn. He opened the doors wide, turned around, fully expecting the birds to fly in, but not a single bird moved. He figured food would entice them, so he hurried back to the house. He fetched breadcrumbs and sprinkled them on the snow, making a trail to the yellow-lit, wide-open doorway of the stable. To his dismay, the birds ignored the breadcrumbs and continued to flap around helplessly in the snow. He tried catching them. He tried shooing them into the barn, walking around like a crazy man, but instead they scattered in every direction except into the warm, lit barn. He scratched his head. He tried to figure out, why will these birds not go into the barn? After all, it just makes sense. It was then he realized, these birds are afraid of me. He reasoned, I am a strange and terrifying creature to them, so if only I could think of a way for them to know that they can trust me, that I'm not trying to hurt them, but I'm here to help them. But how? Any move that I make, it tends to frighten them and confuse them. They will not follow me, and they won't be led. They cannot be shooed, and it's all because they fear me. If only I could be a bird, he said, and mingle with them and speak their language, then I know that they would follow me and they wouldn't be afraid. Then I would show them the way to the safe, warm barn, but I would have to be one of them so they could hear me and see me and understand me. It was at that exact moment the church bells began to ring. The sound reached his ears above the sounds of the wind, so he stood there listening to what seemed forever as the bells pealed the glad tidings of Christmas. It was then that the events of the wondrous night began to sink in. It was then he sank to his knees in the deepening snow. It was then that he finally understood why God came to earth to restore mankind's relationship with him. It was then that he finally believed. My prayer for you and for me both is that this Christmas we too might be able to believe in something that is much bigger than ourselves. It's not just about a baby in a manger or 3 wise men, although that certainly is a part of the story. But the real truth of it is that God so loved us that he sent his only Son, that those of us who will believe in him will have eternal life and to be able to share that eternal life with Him. My prayer is that you and I both come to that deeper knowledge of who Jesus Christ is and why He came. I pray that you have a Merry Christmas and a truly, truly Happy New Year.